Mimetic entities thought forms made up of information inhabiting the universal pool of information available to mankind. A mimetic entity could be fictitious, like Peter Pan, Sherlock Holmes, Thor, or people who achieved fame and became a mimetic entity, like Lennon or Gandhi. Right, so you have Peter Pan here. Storytelling books are being printed. Children movies are being made. Money is being invested to make this character Peter Pan. And even though Peter Pan never existed in reality, human beings act as Peter Pan does. It's part of everybody's dressing up for Halloween as Peter Pan. Not everybody, but a lot of people do dress up as Peter Pan. It's very popular, right? Very popular character. Money is definitely changed our society. Peter Pan, I could say, for a creature that never existed, that's pretty powerful, I would say, right? And here we have Sherlock Holmes in an earlier representation, right, in a comic, and here we have Basil Rathbone, but it's the same idea. See, the same kind of thing, right? And here we have Thor. Thor was also a god, and that begs the question: does that mean that God or Allah or Buddha? Does that mean they're also mimetic entities? Well, the truth is that I don't have the facts because we're still on monotheism. We're still there. We haven't, atheism is not really an update. Atheism it's also a form of religion, right? Which works in a negative. But so we haven't had any kind of update for me to say that. So I can't really say that, right? So Thor, God of Thunder, and this became in the comic, right? And we also have real people like became famous, like John Lennon, for example. John Lennon was a real person, and now it becomes a mimetical entity. Mimetic entity which only has that, how we know him, the guy with the guitar singing Imagine with the round glasses, peace, the bed of love, but we don't know the full John Lennon, right? Because we don't know the real person. So in our imagination it's always going to be as a mimetical entity. So real people can also become mimetical entities and can live forever, or rather, as long as humanity keeps that knowledge alive. And we don't have why certain mimetic entities become more famous than others, but what keeps mimetic entities, the ones that were alive as well as the ones that they are entirely manufactured, is attention, right? So one thing common to both, that they exist through attention. It's human attention which creates these mimetic entities. Attention to emotion. I, self, the eye reaches fastest through the eye because it's directional, of course, right? So now I was talking about the eye before, how the sense of self it's diverted to the eye because we see single pointedly. So I, self equals the eye, right? To seeing. Each of us is a colony of individuals, our DNA. But because the field of vision is single pointedly, so is our sense of self. Individualism is created in such matter, right? Even though we are a colony, but we are or a colony just in regards to information, right? Example. This is an example of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Uh, More than Prometheus. That's what she titled it, right? The title who stole fire from the gods, and it's not coincidental that this is called the modern Prometheus, right? I was showing you earlier Baphomet, how it has the flame, stole the fire from the gods. It's very similar here. So here we have Frankenstein, who was a creature made from many parts, right? From many he's made from many parts. Looking, he's watching. What is he seeing? He's seeing two people kissing. The sexual impulse for creation, emotion, attraction is all guided through the eye, just like our sense of self. Such a narrow way to see the world, no? So what I see that because we have other, we have five senses, right? We have our four that we can experience. The sense that stayed with humanity the most and is the most important, it's actually sound, because we have learned how to use sound before the eye, and you can see that in cave paintings, as cave paintings became hieroglyphs, and as cave paintings transform into words, because words, letters, words, we're able to consolidate information much faster and transfer information much faster than the eye, right? So the eye was an intermediator, but really because of we have sat around campfires telling each other stories, right, for the longest time. And that's why sound is more, and also sound is not directional, sound is three-dimensional. So that's why sound is, hasn't has been with us since the beginning, but it hasn't been lately, mostly in the last 3,000, maybe more years, maybe 10,000, 20,000 years, the eye has been taking precedence, right? But I think it's a trick, right? And you see, he's right away when Frankenstein saw the sexual impulse, something was awakening inside of him. You see how he's guiding, as he's looking, right? And I chosen these images because this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, so it's the most accurate version that's close to the book, right? That's why I chose this particular film, or rather, the slides from this film. So now what he's looking, he's thinking, he's looking again, right? And now what does he see? He sees a whole family, right? So Mary Shelley, this is a bit of a background story to give more context. So Mary Shelley suffered a miscarriage prior to writing the book, and she wrote the monster as her child who came back. She even states that he walked like a baby, even trying to speak like a baby. Frankenstein became a huge hit and learned its place in the library of the greatest literature of her time. But perhaps the most astonishing thing is that the character has evolved into a mimetic entity. I'll explain later what mimetic entity means, because I was explaining, memes, the way we sample reality. There's also entities that can be created through through the same idea, right? Like characters, we have characters, all storytelling. These are all entities, mimetic entities, just the same way that a meme takes information, right? So here you have the family, right? The idea of the family represented visually. And Mary Shelley shown this so clearly. What's it about, right? So here you see time, continuity, the future as well as the past helps orient us, just like the other elements. We are not just what we see in the mirror or what we sound like. We are also everywhere we moved during our lifetime, the worm like trail of our existence. That is also us until the time of our death. So, we move. Even if you stay in one room your whole life, you still move around. And that trail, that doodle, call it what you want, that is also you. That's part of who you are, as well as your image. Your image, your sound, all these are part of you. But when we take sample reality from people, we only remember certain parts, right? But this is a very important part, because that's technically you. From the time you're born, from the time you're conceived, rather, because you're in your mother's womb, and you move with your mother, because it's all part of life. We are not I'm not gonna look like this, and I wasn't like this my whole life, right? You evolved, it becomes a zygote, become a fetus, and then a fetus becomes a baby, and the baby becomes a child, and the child becomes a teenager, and the teenager becomes an adult, and the adult becomes an old person, and then, right? It's part of a process. It's not just, and you cannot separate one from the other, right? The whole part. That's why they're saying that life begins at conception, because indeed it is true that life does begin at conception, when we cannot just separate all the parts that we agree with, because that's not life. We selectively see life, and it's very important for us to see life as it is, as a whole, not just separate the parts that we like and just delete the parts that we ignore, the parts that we don't like, because it would be just ignoring reality. And that's why I made this presentation, to show things that are not exactly how people think they are. So yeah, so you see here's creating an image. You see this him he's smiling. He's perhaps imagining how he would be, if he would have children like that, if he would have a family, or rather, he's happy for the people. Whichever case may be, it does create. It does. You see how he's emoting to the eye, right? So Frankenstein, who's made from many parts, as a colony, as any individual. So he's a symbol for that. The sexual impulse is manifested strongly through the eye, which, being directional, also carries fastest the most amount of information. Information can be manifested through all the five senses, but also from the imagination. The visual element was added later, as I was explaining before. Human beings were transmitting information mostly through sound via storytelling, emotion, prior to the eye. Or we learned how to do pictorial, but it wasn't as simple. It was sounds came first, of course, right? And they have been with us for, because human beings that haven't been around for, the oldest cave paintings like 50,000, right? But human beings have been around for more than 50, 40,000 years or whatever, right? A lot more. Nowhere has most of the above, or I was talking about before, studied than mythology, religion, spirituality, right? What Jungian, in other words, a reflection of the mental onto the material plane, a way of explaining chaos and order at the macro micro level.